Okay, so here's the end of the Origin and Diversity of Life lecture set. Fifth part here, just again re-emphasizing, make sure you guys are comfortable with what are the different scientific hypotheses that test origin and diversity of life, or more importantly, the origin of life. The Miller-Urey, the from another planet hypothesis, what can we test scientifically? And then the diversity of life, we look at that geologically through the geological record, Precambrian era, what were the key events during that time period, what were the key events during the Paleozoic era, the Mesozoic era, and then the Cenozoic era. So life has changed and evolved significantly across the last 3.5, 6, 3.8 billion years since life first originated on Earth. However it got here, it's evolved and diversified dramatically into the roughly 1.8 million species we know of. There's probably a whole lot more out there that we don't know of yet. So it's continuously evolving. Life's changing, evolving, and diversifying right in front of us. The challenge is, can we watch it change? Do we live long enough to see life evolve? In some aspects or some species, no, we will never see it evolve because we can't watch enough generations. Remember, evolution is the change in the genetic diversity of a population or species over time, particularly generations. And if it takes you 20 years to produce a generation, and it takes, let's say maybe it's going to take 3 million years for that species to significantly evolve, we're not going to see it. Even if it took 3,000 years, we're not going to see it. But we can see things evolve that have short generation cycles. Bacteria, 20 minutes, got a generation. You can watch thousands of generations in the course of our lifetime, if not more. Those are the things we can actually watch evolve and change. This is why we have resistant strains, things called MRSA. Tuberculosis is resistant. Viruses evolve because they reproduce so rapidly. Okay, so lots and lots of things change and evolve over time. But there are certain species and different groups that really haven't changed much. These are things called living fossils. Now, living fossils are species that have not evolved in a long period of time. Okay, they look basically same today as their ancestors. And when I say ancestors, I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about millions and millions of years ago. They just haven't changed much. Most of these things are living in environments that don't require change, that haven't required change for millions of years. They were the most adaptable species. They were, if you want to say, close to perfect. The species didn't need to change because it was already doing a great job. So some examples of living fossils. I don't want you guys to worry about memorizing the details of each of these examples, but just what are examples? Think about things you know of that look just prehistoric, that you're looking, wow, that looks like it's something from millions of years ago, and it looks just like what we would find in the fossil record. Okay, so here's the first example when we look at living fossils. Alligator snapping turtles. If any of you guys have ever played with one of these, they look like they should be back during the dinosaur era. And the reason for that, that's when they first appeared. So the fossils of snapping turtles, alligator snapping turtles, go back 200 million years ago. And when we compare a fossil that's 200 million years old to a living snapping turtle today, there's really not much of a difference. They really haven't changed. They're what we call a living fossil. But you look at this species and take humans out of the picture, us poaching, us destroying their habitat, etc. What could we do to improve upon this creature? It's phenomenal. It's got this big, crazy sharp jaw that can slice through prey with just a snap of its jaw. It's got this dangly little appendage in its mouth that looks like a worm. And they open their mouth and it dangles there, and fish swim in going, ooh, there's a nice easy meal. And then bam, the jaws come down and sever the fish in half. Armor-plated shells, they can sit in the bottom of a pond or a watery environment, holding their breath for long, long periods of time. You can't really improve upon that. And there's been no need for them to evolve. Now the problem is, we come into the picture, and in the last couple hundred years, we're pushing them to the edge of extinction. Crocodiles. These guys go back 160 million years. Same perspective as a snapping turtle. What could we change about a crocodile to make it more adaptable other than figuring out a way to deal with humans? Take us out of the picture. There's been no reason for them to change or evolve or adapt and become something different. They are one of the only orders of reptiles to actually survive through the extinction of the dinosaurs, that 56 or 65 million year ago meteorite, Cretaceous calamity. The only major difference today, a crocodile today versus 100 plus million years ago, is size. They were much bigger back then. That's the scary part about crocodiles. Much bigger. But they went through directional selection. Smaller was better because your food availability decreased. Less prey, smaller crocodiles would survive because they needed less calories. Coelacanths. First ones we see in the fossil record dating back about 360 million years ago. These guys live in the deep parts of the ocean. The ocean doesn't change that much. It hadn't changed for millions and millions and millions of years. We've been changing it in the last 50 to 100 years with climate change and human issues. But coelacanths, they haven't changed. They're almost identical to their fossil records that go back 360 million years. They got these lobed fins that move like arms and legs. They can walk across the bottom of the ocean. They're adapted. And that environment didn't require them to change. There's not a lot driving change in the deep parts of the ocean environment. Horsetails. These are these reedy plants you'll often see growing around ponds and ditches and marshy areas. They show up 345 to almost 400 million years ago. Only major difference? They were huge. They were over 50 feet tall. But directional selection. Smaller is better in this example. They started getting outcompeted by other plants, by the seed plants. Horsetails reproduce with spores. They're a seedless type of plant. But smaller. We see horsetails today. This picture here is of modern day horsetails. They're pretty much identical to their ancestors, except in size. Ancestors were much bigger. So while some things got bigger over evolution, other things got smaller. We talked about the horse. It was better to get bigger if you were a horse because that was more adaptable. In the case of our crocodiles and our horsetails, it was better to become smaller over time. Sharks. I want you to tell me, what can you do to improve upon the shark? Great whites go back 450 million years. Modern sharks about 180 million years ago. You look at that animal and it is the top level species or top level group in the ocean today. Again, remove humans from the picture. We're just slaughtering sharks millions a year and just decimating their populations. Sharks have relatively nothing to fear except for humans. Counter shading. Top is dark, bottom is light. If you're a prey and you're swimming above the shark, you can't see it because you look down and you see this dark shadow on the bottom of the ocean. If you're underneath it and you look up, you can't see it because the white, light-colored belly and underneath blends in with the sky. Torpedo-shaped body, massive propulsion from the back tail. Amazing creatures. Nothing really needed to be improved upon, and diversification. So these guys really haven't changed much. You look at Megalodon, very similar to the great white shark we have today, except smaller. Less prey, smaller food sources. Being a smaller individual is far more beneficial. Sharks got smaller over 180 million years of evolution. And lastly, our horseshoe crab. These guys actually are important to us. We use their blood to detect bacterial infections during surgeries. Incredibly important in the biomedical field. Their ancestors first showed up 350 million years ago, and we haven't seen really any changes since. They're pretty much identical. A little bit of size difference, but not much else. So when we look at life, life has changed. Adaptations occur, evolution occurs, living things, the populations, the species change and adapt in response to environmental changes, the rippling effect. If the environment changes, one species changes, causes another one to change. All these interactions between species and food webs and ecosystems creates ecological connections, and it creates evolutionary change. There's a thing called coevolution, or the evolutionary arms race. If your predator gets faster and evolves to become faster, the prey has to evolve if it's going to continue to survive. If the prey gets faster and evolves to become a faster species, the predator has to evolve if it wants to keep eating. So ecological interactions are constantly driving evolution, and environmental changes, temperature goes up, temperature goes down, weather patterns shift, etc., are driving changes, evolutionary changes in populations. The big concern and the big challenge right now is that because of climate change, human-driven climate change, we're forcing these changes to happen rapidly, and a lot of species can't do it, and they're going to be going extinct, or I shouldn't say are going to, they are currently going extinct right in front of our eyes. The concern towards all of us will be, what kind of impact does that have upon humans and human society and human well-being as millions and millions or hundreds of thousands of species potentially continue to go extinct right in front of our eyes. So that's a bigger topic to explore in ecology when we get into 112, but it definitely connects into evolution. All these things, the goal is to see how they all intersect and interconnect with each other with the various topics and the different biological themes. Okay, so the last lecture to check out is going to be human evolution. We'll go through some of the highlights about humans, what's going on with us, how did we get here from where we diverged from the ape ancestors. Big thing I'll mention, want to really stress with human evolution, we have cousins out there, evolutionary cousins. They are not our ancestors. They are our cousins that are out there today. So we'll cover that in another lecture.